What if I came up with a model where it's similar to concierge medicine, where I have a very small number of clients, but I give them really deep, undivided attention, and there's a 48-hour client service response time guarantee, or the next month's free of charge, barring terms and conditions. And I only work with 20 people because that's all that I can legitimately take on to give them the time and attention that the client deserves.
Welcome to the CPA Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Carlos Ochoa, and today I'm really excited to welcome Elan Becker. Elan is the founder of the Concierge Accountant, and he's taking a really distinct path, focusing on an exclusive 1 to 20 client ratio, which I thought was really interesting. And he provides very deep strategic CFO and tax advisory services for businesses grossing over $1 million, particularly in niches like e-commerce, food and beverage, and restaurants. So Elan, thanks for joining me.
To be with you.
Thank you. Yeah. So your model immediately stands out to me because it's the opposite of the high volume approach that many accountants take. And I'd be fascinated to dive into why you chose this concierge path and how you think about attracting those clients and what that deep level of service actually looks like.
Yeah, I started the business model that I have because of my own personal experience dealing with CPA firms, but I feel overall the professional services environment, whether it's doctors or lawyers or other bookkeepers, I feel like everybody in that niche kind of falls under one umbrella, which is high-level service-based businesses. And I just have noticed that getting any kind of customer service is next to impossible. Now, I differentiate between customer service and client service because to me, client service is the overall experience that comes with how you deliver the work to the client, but customer service is when you're actually answering questions, client wants to get on the phone with you. How fast are you responding to their emails and their phone calls? And then I've noticed that even doing my own taxes and hiring a CPA firm to do it, it would take me weeks to get a hold of anybody. I send an email, nobody answers it. I have to constantly follow up. It's really irritating. And so I looked at like the whole model of the CPA firm world. And one thing I've noticed is having networked with CPA firms over the past decade or so is the CPA firm model is such that you have to have thousands of clients or else there's just not even enough money left over to pay the salaries, pay your workers' compensation, pay all the overhead that's required to run a CPA firm and be legally compliant as well. And for me, just trying to boast about, I have 1,000 plus clients, I don't think it's really that much of a flex because of those 1,000 plus clients, I guarantee you that they wish that their accountant, whether it's their CPA or EA, would respond to them in a timely fashion. And a lot of them are still stuck in this sort of billing hourly, hours utilization, and it doesn't work for anybody. So I said, let's go back to the basics and realize that these business owners, more than anything, want a financial right-hand man. And that's one thing I emphasize because there's this whole path where everybody's coming into the market and saying, hey, I'm a fractional CFO. But when you look at it, it's based on a couple of flawed premises. The first is they're charging a lot of money, but it's equivalent to going to the Days Inn, where I believe it's still bare bones and they're still not giving you enough service. So in reality, they're not doing it because, hey, they need a CFO to these clients, but rather they're doing it in order to shore up their own operational inefficiencies from their firms, thinking, okay, I can just go and introduce more of these high-priced services just to shore up my own firm's finances. And ultimately, that doesn't work for anybody. So I came in, I said, okay, what if I came up with a model where it's similar to concierge medicine, where I have a very small number of clients, but I give them really deep, undivided attention, and there's a 48-hour client service response time guarantee, or the next month's free of charge, barring terms and conditions. And I only work with 20 people because that's all that I can legitimately take on to give them the time and attention that the client deserves.
That's very interesting. And I love the backstory and hearing the comparison between the high volume model and the model that you've chosen. And as a reaction to something that you saw in the industry, just before I dig in deeper, what was your practice like before you decided to switch to this model? Was it a high volume model as well?
I mean, I was doing more freelance accounting after I left the e-commerce industry.
And so beyond the 48-hour guarantee, and the client service versus customer service differentiation that you just painted. Can you tell us more about what the white glove service looks like for you in terms of the kind of services that you're offering on a day-to-day basis to your clients?
Yeah, the white glove service is a couple of different parts. The first is that many accountants are saying, hey, I give unlimited email access. That's nice, but there's nothing special about that. I say that as part of my all-inclusive package, you get unlimited client portal access, client email access, dedicated client phone number, to include text messaging and phone calls. And additionally, you also have a dedicated client calendar where you can book calls whenever you need to be able to access me over a particular challenge that your business is facing. But also, I say that if the client really does need several phone calls a day because there's such a big challenge and they need my help with it, like, all right, you paid good money for this, book a time.
Yeah. And so are you billing all of your clients the same amount, or does it vary depending on the amount of work that the challenge brings to you?
Yeah, it varies based on client revenue because
Okay.
I generally work with business owners that are doing about $1 million top line, and it can go up to about 10 to 15. So what I ask is, due to the very exclusive nature of the service, I ask for 5% of the client's revenue that they made in the previous year, and then that's paid monthly. And then if they want an annual plan, there's 20 to 30% discount. So it
Okay.
can really go anywhere from, let's say, 4,000 a month to 40 grand a month.
Wow.
Have some numbers around there.
Wow, that's really cool. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to be really
If you think
thinking
about it this
about
way,
how they can.
think about it
Yeah.
this way, which is that if the average business owner is, let's say, paying a couple $1,000s to get their tax return done for the business, and let's say bookkeeping's an additional $500
Right.
for your business, and that's of course assuming that they really like what they're getting out of those two professionals, then the question is that you think, okay, is $4,000 a month a lot of money? Yeah, it is. But again, additionally, hiring employees also costs money, and you're paying them, what, 5, 6 grand a month, plus the employer payroll taxes, plus all the workers' comp, plus any other regulatory costs that you have to face in order to hire that employee. And I'm just saying, look, for less than what it would cost to hire an employee, but with the high level touch of what you would get from some executive at a large corporation, I think there's a huge amount of savings.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way to frame it. Compared to an in-house employee, hiring you is definitely a lot better value. So finding clients who are willing and able to invest, let's say $48,000 a year, requires a very targeted approach. So how do you identify and connect with these $1 million plus revenue businesses in whatever industry they're in? Do you have a primary strategy for getting in front of them?
Yeah, there's a few different ones that I do. So one of them is just that I'll work with family offices because they have more of those high level
Mm,
clients. That's one way to approach it. The other way to approach it is just through targeted supplier partnerships. So some of these businesses, especially within the e-commerce restaurant space, it's very difficult to find them on LinkedIn, and then sometimes social media, it's not always clear cut as to how you actually reach out to those owners. So I kind of work backwards a little bit, and I think, okay, I've been to these businesses before. What is it that they're buying for their business? Okay, let's say they're buying cleaning supplies or buying chairs, tables, napkins, whatever the case is. Then you have to think, okay, who are those suppliers that already are working with the restaurants who are doing pretty well? And then I partner with them, and then we work out a collaboration model.
that's brilliant. I've never heard of an accountant doing that. I've heard of investment bankers partnering up with accountants in order to find acquisition targets, but I've never heard about it from the accountant's perspective in like how to find clients. And so how does that collaboration model usually look like? Do you give them a cut of what you're making, or?
First thing I ask the collaboration partner is, please ask the business owner that they know within the particular niche that I'm targeting what their experience
Mhm.
is like with their tax advisor. I'm not a CPA, I'm an EA, which is
Mhm.
a bit different, but nonetheless, I asked them in the first order, okay, they're already working with somebody to file their taxes, obviously. What is that experience like? Most
Right.
of the time when I am talking to these business owners, they're all saying, yeah, my accountant doesn't answer me.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you give your partners a bit of a script, it sounds, to introduce the idea of working with you to their own clients.
Yeah, I ask them, I like what they're doing in X industry, and then I say, I do this for my clients in this space, and it seems like you work with those clients. What do you think of the idea of partnering up? Like, I come in, it's like, what do you think of? Because obviously I want to come in and make it mutually beneficial for both me and the partner, but at the same time, it's like, what do you think? It gives them the ability to say, okay, you know what, this guy's coming in, but it's not forced. It's like, you like the idea.
Yeah. And how do you typically reach out to those partners? Is it via LinkedIn, via cold email?
LinkedIn is definitely the main channel. I am starting a bunch of different cold email marketing campaigns, so that we'll see if that comes to fruition or not.
Interesting. So just to recap here, you reach out, you figure out who the partners are for the businesses who you want to work with. You look up those partners on LinkedIn, you send them a message, you introduce yourself, your services, you propose a collaboration model, which they agree to, and then they introduce you to their clients.
Could be JV or affiliate venture, depending on how you want to look at it.
Interesting. And what do you think is your success rate there?
It depends. I'll say that with the CPA firm model, in terms of just doing like on-demand taxes, because that's another thing I do within my business, that has gotten me quite a lot of success. And of course, given that I got my enrolled agent card in the middle of tax season, it was definitely a little bit more difficult to do it. But I would say that that's been pretty successful when it comes to getting people interested. I've been getting a lot of calls, a lot of leads, particularly for just on-demand tax consulting and maybe tax prep. Because doing that, and this is just for any accountant that wants to do it, it's one where that's a far more profitable model. It's just to find the CPA firms that already have the existing infrastructure in place, and then you can partner with them to be able to come in just as a on-demand contractor, so that works for everybody. But in terms of your other question, how do I go about finding them? And then the conversion rate, the restaurant industry definitely is a lower conversion rate than, let's say, talking to a bunch of e-commerce related partners. E-commerce partners seems to be a little bit more successful, as well as anybody in the CPG industry. That seems to be okay, but definitely restaurants are a pretty challenging industry.
Yeah, it's not very big margins there. Yeah, when
I think that there is. It's
are.
just the problem is that if you think about the restaurant space, you have owners. Yes, they know how to cook and they know how to provide hospitality. That's the biggest part of running a restaurant. And the problem is that giving hospitality is different from understanding a financial statement. They're two completely different skills.
Yeah, running a business.
So, and the problem is that under these traditional CPA firm models, there's not enough time to give people who run these very demanding, challenging industries the time and attention that they need in order to be successful. I say that any restaurant who has an owner that knows what they're doing, is running a tight ship, who knows their prime cost, who knows how to handle all the fixed expenses that are coming in and paying for it the right way, I believe they can get 20%.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. That's not what you hear usually about the restaurant industry. You hear about restaurants closing left and right. Most of them don't last a year. So I really like the idea of having somebody specialized who can give them the attention that they deserve and that they need in order to help their businesses succeed in the way that they deserve. And that's a really great investment. And I think when you put it that way, it makes a lot of sense to pay the fees that you're demanding, that you're asking for to these businesses. In addition to these partnerships, I see that you're also very active on LinkedIn. I see you've got a newsletter. I'm not sure how active you are on the newsletter.
I've been writing the newsletter since last year. It was an experiment because initially I was doing exit planning, and then what I realized from writing that, people are more interested in learning how to scale their business. Exit planning, in a way, is trying to sell a coffin to somebody who's already alive. Sure, we already know that they're going to die, but it's like, why are you trying to sell something to somebody where they don't know when it is that they're going to need it? Maybe they're going to need it 30 years later. It's really difficult to do.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But on LinkedIn, you seem to be more active. So how much does content marketing and building authority play a role versus this more strategic level of networking that you're doing, that you're talking about?
It plays somewhat of a role in terms of having some credibility when it comes to trying to offer what I offer. Has it gotten me clients? Yeah, it's gotten me leads. It's gotten me one potential partnerships. I'm looking at a few of them right now that are in progress. But I have to admit that what's interesting is that now that I'm at 2,000 followers, of course, not that I really care because followers don't bring money into my company's bank account, but it just seems that with that follower count, my posts are just getting much more comments.
Oh, interesting.
Or when I was initially like building up like 200, 300, 400 connections, okay, now I'm at 500 plus. And of course, again, it's like people are saying, hey, I have 10,000 connections. And my reply is, okay, who cares? Because you can't even manage a 10,000 person CRM on your own. And that's basically what LinkedIn, I believe, is that it's basically a CRM that you're still trying to figure out how to develop and manage yourself.
That's a very interesting frame. LinkedIn as a CRM. I'd honestly never thought about it that way, but it is. I personally use it a lot for managing my relations. It does make sense to call it a CRM more than a social media platform.
Yeah, there's crazy people on it. It's like funny actually. They say, yeah, it's the last place for civility. I would disagree with that because there's a lot of people who troll and who say ridiculously stupid things and they're just trying to stir people up and try to get everyone pissed off and angry. And obviously I get those comments all the time on my LinkedIn threads and I just delete them and don't pay attention to them because most of the time the people who are doing it, they don't even have a LinkedIn profile picture. So all these people are just lazy.
Yeah, it takes a backbone to really have a point of view that you're willing to stand up for and attach it to your professional identity.
Yeah, I've actually had a lot of people give me heat because
really?
the best performing LinkedIn post was about the fact that just because someone has a CPA doesn't mean that they're entitled to respect. And it's funny how there actually were a lot of people that supported that, but then there were a lot of people that said, yeah, I never want to hire you. I don't want anything to do with you. I just, okay.
Yeah.
Comes with it.
You get a lot of weirdos on LinkedIn, and having those polarizing opinions, I think, brings out a lot of really interesting interactions because you see a side of people that you wouldn't see otherwise, like in a regular thread. That's interesting. So you have a very specific model as a concierge accountant, and you've already talked about your partnership model. Do you find yourself having to turn away potential clients who aren't the right fit for you very often?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've talked with a bunch of different clients, and the problem is that a lot of clients are in pre-rev stage. So once you're pre-revenue, there's nothing I can do to help you. Sure, I can give you a little bit of my time, and I'm happy to give some advice, but the problem is that a lot of clients I've spoken to, at least it was in the beginning, where they would need a one-off project, and I was happy to do it just to bring some money in the door. As time went on and I started to build this business, it was one where I just felt that the client had to go back to the drawing board, really figure out what kind of business they wanted. And once they had that, and then once they were having proof of concept, and they started growing, then, okay, I can come and I can really offer my expertise for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of that, can you share maybe an anonymized example of how you helped a client overcome a specific challenge? I just think that there's more, like your approach is more, it feels more like you're hand holding them through fixing their businesses. And I'd like to hear like a story that comes to mind.
I remember that there was one client that I worked with where they were a pet food manufacturer. It's all on LinkedIn. You can go read the testimonial there, but they were a pet food manufacturer, and there was some accounting questions that they had when it came to, they're now selling on Walmart, and I used to sell there, but it turns out that Walmart has two different divisions. One of them is selling into stores. That's where Walmart actually pays the supplier. But there's another side of the business called Walmart Fulfillment Services, which is similar to your Amazon Prime.
Oh, I see.
And the question the client has is that they were piloting this project and then they wanted to sell their pet products within Walmart Fulfillment Services. And there was a lot of things that were going through their head when it came to how do you account for the inventory, who owns it, how do you integrate it, how do you do the accounting? Because a lot of companies don't understand the e-commerce space is that when you're selling on platforms, it's a whole nother layer of accounting requirements compared to just, hey, I sold this to the store and now they're paying me and I just recorded my accounting system. Because what happens is that if the client were to go and to just look at their bank account and say, hey, look at these deposits that we're getting from Walmart sales, what they forgot is that the sales are not coming for another 30 days. And then there were all these fees that were deducted for the cost of selling on that platform. And those costs are not being tracked. You don't know what they are. So in addition to that, so how do we go and how do we count for those costs? Well, there's another software that you need. And I told them that because they use NetSuite, to use A2X because A2X integrated with NetSuite. Now, A2X is a type of a software where if you're an e-commerce seller on Amazon, Walmart, and those kinds of places, then what happens is that instead of solely relying on your accounting software to make that connection, which it doesn't, you have a separate piece of software that actually imports all that data that is directly connected to the marketplaces, and then in turn that feeds it into your accounting system. So I helped advise them on that, and then advise them on some other high-level issues with revenue recognition that affected their company and led to a great result.
Awesome. Yeah. Wow. That definitely sounds like something that your regular CPA wouldn't be able to do for you.
Most CPAs, unfortunately, are not well-versed in the e-commerce industry, let alone they've never owned an e-commerce store like I have. That's why I was able to advise them properly on it.
So what kind of e-commerce store did you own?
I personally used to own my own Amazon store that was fulfilled by Amazon. I sold medical products.
Oh, interesting.
Then I had a few other stores that were what are called automation businesses. Unfortunately, they failed. And then I had other partners managing those. And those were like on Shopify, Facebook Marketplace.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like you have a bunch of experience in e-commerce, and that probably...
And
I can see how that...
And a lot of painful lessons the hard way. I'm actually willing to admit that, unfortunately, those e-commerce stores failed for a number of different reasons.
Yeah, that's your... Lessons are never... The cheaper lessons are never as valuable.
Especially what's funny is that a lot of people say they're successful in whatever, go ask them about their failures, and they'll tell you a mile-long list of failures, but for whatever reason, they're afraid to share them because I guess the facade is a little bit fragile.
Yeah. And this brings me to another question. I've heard a lot of people say that being an accountant is equivalent to an MBA because you get to see inside so many businesses. But what's your point of view on actually having experience running a business versus being involved at a more high level as an accountant in the financial aspect of the variety of different businesses? Which one do you think is more valuable to you as an accountant?
They're just two different mindsets. The first is running a business requires a certain way of thinking. A lot of these other accountants, let's say that they're controller or CFO of a large company, depending on what that industry is, it's a matter of they worked their way up somehow. I don't know what every career is different, but you can say that they're pretty good working within a system. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. But in terms of providing value to your clients, if you had to choose one path, which one would you choose?
What I'll say is, one thing I just have noticed being an accountant for different companies is what ends up happening is your knowledge is basically relegated to that industry, and then when you try to go and then look for another accounting job, and then let's say you're working in construction, but then you want to go into fund accounting or do real estate accounting, they're two completely different things. Now, you may think, okay, accounting is accounting, right? There's GAAP and there's fundamental foundations in accounting, but unfortunately, a lot of these companies, they just already want somebody who already has knowledge within that industry. So a lot of times, if you're running an accounting business, it's one where you can just say, hey, I work in these industries and I want to branch into these industries, get the skills needed to understand the industry lingo. But if you're just an accountant going from company to company, then it's a different way of looking at that. Okay, I worked in this system. Now I figure out how do I refine myself within the system? How do I understand the system? It's completely different. I mean, it just comes down to like preference.
And now, for listeners who are perhaps feeling overwhelmed and overworked, especially as tax season just recently came to a close, and maybe they're not ready for the full concierge model that you've been describing, but what would you say is the first practical step that they can make towards niching down or increasing their perceived value?
I mean, I would say to anybody who's starting this business, learn sales and marketing more than anything. And once you learn that, then you can worry about delivery of your services.
Interesting. So it's more about learning how to position yourself more than figuring out what services you're offering.
Yeah, businesses sound sexy, but if you can't execute and you can't distribute, it means nothing.
Yeah. Now, if you could only use one marketing channel or one marketing strategy to find your next ideal client, and you couldn't use the not referral marketing, but the partnership marketing model that you've been using, what would it be?
Ooh, what would it be? LinkedIn, I've mastered at least a little bit. I probably would stick with that because I've been trying to build up my company's Instagram presence, and Instagram is definitely a learning curve for me. Probably
Instagram. LinkedIn. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I've been spending a little more time on Instagram. I left it for about a year. It's interesting how much it's changed over the past 12 months, I would say, where video is much more important. Having those short reels, which also seem to be making a big splash on LinkedIn. Is that something that you've experimented with?
I don't know.
No video for you. Yeah,
I need to.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I posted, I think, one video and I got discouraged.
Yeah, if you make videos, just understand that you're probably going to have to make a year's worth before anyone notices it.
Yeah, and that goes for any kind of content marketing, right?
I'll say this, which is that when it comes to LinkedIn, it's
Yeah.
one where I didn't really get any traction with my posting on LinkedIn until maybe a month and a half ago. And then
Wow.
over time, once I started to get 1,000 followers, 1,500, 2,000, it'll just go up organically. It's not like I'm asking people to follow me, but I don't know, I guess people are interested in what I have to say. Then,
Yeah.
okay, whatever it is I'm posting, like people want to comment on it.
Yeah, and what's your process for coming up with these posts? You seem to post pretty consistently.
Yeah, just based on what I want to talk about. It's most of what I realize is that the posts that flop are based upon giving business owners in a specific niche some sort of tip. And I don't seem to get as many comments on that as I do with talking about something that affects accountants
Ah,
in general. And it just seems like the people, and what's funny actually is that the content I'm posting is not even aimed at accountants. Like I'm actually
right,
aiming it at business owners, but for
right.
whatever reason it is, I'm getting so many comments from CPAs or EAs or other people within the financial space.
Yeah, that's something I've noticed as I've been connecting with more accountants on LinkedIn. I notice that it's usually other accountants or vendors who are trying to reach accountants who are interacting with their posts and not the business owners who the posts seem to be directed towards, which is funny.
That's because
And
business owners are aimed at the consumers. Say so when you look at the marketing, it's one where this is where it gets challenging. Is if you're working with business owners that are consumer facing versus B2B, as in you're in healthcare or your SaaS construction, those industries, those are truly B2B spaces, and it's pretty easy to say, hey, I'm going to just be on LinkedIn, do nothing but LinkedIn because LinkedIn is B2B. But if you're working with somebody like me who wants to work with people who are already serving the public, then LinkedIn is a challenging place.
right. Yeah, they have very little reason to be on LinkedIn. And I think that's where your entry into Instagram makes a lot of sense.
You know,
So, what would you say is the biggest challenge, or what has been the biggest challenge in building this very specific type of high value, low volume practice for you?
I think there's a number of them. Marketing and sales are always going to be the hardest. Marketing has gotten harder and harder over the past several years, and definitely taking marketing from the e-commerce industry, which was, now I think about it, was actually pretty easy because it's one where I already had a built up word of mouth referral network for
Mm,
all my products, and people would test them and they would comp them and then they would leave a review. And then they left enough reviews to a point where it could grow organically. And then once I run ads, then the ads started to help generate a lot of sales. But in this space, it requires a whole different learning curve when it comes to like how you do outreach to business owners. That's the challenge I've seen. But the other thing has been that, yeah, I know a lot about accounting and taxes and cash flow. And then there are these people on LinkedIn who can't help but be a big mouth and say, yeah, if you haven't worked at a CPA firm for 4 to 6 years and you have no business starting your own firm. And of course, those people are just nutcases. But in the end, you have to have belief in yourself that you can do it. And to heck with these people who say, yeah, you already need to do this before doing this. I'm like, oh, I've got my own path and you got yours. And I'll do what I have to do to grow my business.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And in terms of growing your business, I'm not sure how close you are to hitting your 20
Yeah.
20 client cap. But I bet that one of the benefits of your model is that you're probably not in any hurry to get there either, right? Because
I'm
you
not in a
get to
hurry
a
to
lot
take
of
on the wrong clients. I will say that, like any business owner, we're always in a hurry to get more sales, but it's one where I'm already doing more of the freelance model to bring more income into the business and then using that to funnel it into the ads for my higher level services. Other hand, I want to say that I do not have a client cap when it comes to tax resolution services because
oh,
tax
interesting.
resolution is a slower process when it comes to resolving tax liability issues. And in many ways, actually, tax resolutions like workers' comp, as workers' comp regulations are A plus B equals C, and then the outcome is going to lead to the intended
Right.
result. There's no, but it goes this way, it goes this way. Workers' comp is a very straightforward process. Solutions like that as well, where if you take on a client that needs offer and compromise, for example, the offer and compromise has a very specific process. And this equals this outcome, and that's that. So there isn't a need to limit the amount of clients on that. And also, it's not industry specific because following 1120 is the same for one niche as it is for another niche. Yeah, sure, there'll be variations, whatever. But the end result is if the client is audited or if they're having tax issues, it's going to be the same as any other business owner faces the same thing.
Interesting. That's something I never thought about. It also sounds like it's much easier to guarantee a result there than in your more concierge service.
Additionally, it's one where the reason why tax resolution services, I believe, is way easier to market is because once the client's in tax trouble, they have to do something about it. 1, 2, 3.
Right.
Granted, yes, they can shop around and try to find the right tax advisor who's knows the tax resolution space and who knows how to get a favorable result for the client. But in the end, it's the emotional aspect that comes out of marketing is very easy to attach, which I think is one of the most important things.
And how do you think about marketing those services in comparison to marketing your concierge services?
I haven't started marketing yet. It's still working. Excuse me for a second. It's still a work in progress just because I'm going through a lot of trainings to get up to speed with the tax resolution because I just got my EA a couple months ago. So definitely doing the work is not the problem. The problem is more just you run ads, or I personally am looking to work with other CPA firms because what I'm noticing is in the CPA firm space, they're pretty good at tax strategy, tax planning. Like that's what they're good at. Whether CPA or EA, I don't think matters at this point, but that's what they know how to do. But it's not definite in terms of whether that CPA firm knows how to handle extremely complex tax resolution cases. Yes, I'm sure they could do just a basic offer and compromise. They could do it. But you don't know as to whether they know how to do a complex innocent spouse relief case in a divorce proceeding. Have they done trust fund recovery penalty assessments? Have they done anything that has to do with injured spouse versus innocent spouse versus someone has back taxes that go back 5-6 years and they haven't filed returns, and can they get up to speed with that? Granted, if, let's say I partner with an EA, they're going to know how to do it. No problem. Right. So part of my strategy is, okay, let's partner with people who, are going to need a lot of help with this. Attorneys are definitely a big part. I've actually been working with an advisor at it's called SCORE, and they said to partner with attorneys or maybe accounts with smaller practices, and I say, hey, I offer tax resolution, and that's an easy way to get in. And once money slowly starts to come in, and then I get testimonials, then, okay, a lot of people in the tax resolution space have been successful with ads on Google and Facebook and those things that are consumer-facing.
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds a lot like if you got a pipe that burst at your home, you need to hire a plumber straight away, so you're going to go online and look for one, right? So it makes sense that Google ads are working for those kind of practices.
The mistake that people make in this space is, I've had this problem myself where I talk to a lot of these marketing companies, say, hey, we help grow your business and we'll help you get clients and all these guarantees, until you realize that they want you to spend all these money on ad costs when you're still trying to prove proof of concept.
Yeah.
Because I think about my time in the e-commerce space, and I only ran ads after I was getting sales organically, and I started to have reviews, and I started to build that up. And then once there were sales that were consistently coming in, then I started to get into ads. But a lot of times, these marketing companies want you just to run ads right away when you are still trying to figure out, how do I grow this business on a bootstrap, which is what I'm doing. And to me, it's scary because, when I talk to them, why do they want so much of my money? Because they're never going to put their own money on the line.
Yeah, agencies that run Facebook ads or Google ads for clients they can be good in some situations, but as you said, you have to have a proven model that works, a proven offer that is going to attract the right kind of clients for you, because otherwise you're pouring fuel in a fire that's not even started to burn, and that can lead you down a very bad road.
Yeah.
This conversation has been wonderful. I think it really underscores the power of strategic positioning, defining your ideal client, introducing yourself into the right partnerships. So I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast, Elan. I think this has been fantastic. Where can people learn more about the Concierge Accountant, connect with you, and maybe subscribe to your content?
Yeah, there's a few different ways they can do it. They can go to LinkedIn, Elan Becker, that's where I'm at. I also have a booking link there where prospective clients can book a call with me. I also have my website, theconciergeaccountant.com, and my email is elon@theconciergeaccountant.com, so they can reach out to me there. I actually finding interesting that a lot of people have been reaching out to me with these LinkedIn consulting requests. They're scams. I don't answer those.
Yeah, and you shouldn't. Thank you so much, Elan. Until next time.
Okay, yeah. Awesome to be with you, Carlos, and love your podcast and love what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.